Okay, so now we've gathered all of our data and we've created a nice little basic GIS, and the next step is that we want to be able to take this data and create a map from it that we can either share with one of our coworkers or post to our website or email to a visitor as a PDF. So to do that, if you remember from earlier, we can close our ArcPad Data Manager toolbar. And if we want to create a map here, we might want to look at the page size that we're going to be able to print this thing out on. So to do that, if you remember, we were looking at Layout View. Go to the View menu here, and we go to Layout View, and we can see that now we see the boundaries of our page. Generally, the first thing you want to do here is go to the File menu and go to Page and Print Setup. And this will allow you to choose the printer that you're going to print it out on. If you're going to print to a PDF, you could choose Adobe PDF on here if you have it. But most importantly, you're interested in the size of the paper that you're going to print. So letter, you want to print a legal size one. You want to make your map 11 by 17. You have a big oversized printer. You can choose your paper size here. And for this particular part of the garden, I think that a landscape orientation is probably going to make a little bit more sense. So we'll do it in landscape. And we'll hit OK. And now what this has done is it's changed our page size. And if we had selected a regular printer, it would show in a gray boundary here where our printer margins were. So I'm actually going to change back to the printer here, change to this printer, and now we can see this dashed gray line here that shows us how far out to the edge of the paper we can put stuff on our page without it being cut off. Now we're going to position a bunch of things on this. I'm going to move this box around so that our map fits on our page, and then we're going to put on a scale bar and a title and a few other things to make our map a little nicer, a little bit easier to understand. But to lay those things out, I like to set up a few options first. So if you right-click on the white area here on our page, we can see that we've got some options here. Towards the bottom, we can turn rulers on and off, or make things that we move around snap to those. We can set up guides that we can turn on and off and snap to them. I always want to turn on the grid. And then I'll do this one more time and make it so that we're going to snap to the grid. So that means all these objects that we're moving around on our page will be easily lined up with these dots that kind of measure out areas on the page. So now I want to take this data frame here, which represents all of our layers over here in our table of contents, and I'm going to drag it so that it lines up with the grid marks in the lower left-hand corner of my page, but doesn't go past that dotted gray line that represents our printer margin. And then I can use the scroll bar on the right to scroll up to the top of this data frame and grab this little toggle point in the upper right-hand corner so that our cursor changes to have this double-headed arrow. And then click and drag this, and I'm going to drag it all the way over to the last grid line on the right. And I'm going to leave a couple grid lines across the top so I can put a title on this map. And then if I want to get this to fit nicely on the screen for me, I can go to the Layout toolbar, which if you remember we probably docked earlier and may be floating around on your screen. But it's got a few zoom in tools, and about 4 over from the left there's one that says zoom whole page. I'll click on that and that'll fit our page pretty nicely on the screen. Now one thing we can do, now that we've made our box bigger, we can see that our data isn't quite zoomed in quite as far as we might like. So I can take our zoom in tools, and one important differentiation is that there are 2 sets of zoom tools here. We've got some that are on our layout toolbar that affect how far we're zoomed in on this page, really. And then we've got the other ones that we've been working with all day that affect the just basically the data itself. So I want to just zoom this data in, so I'm going to grab the zoom in tool, and then I'm going to click and drag a rectangle around the area that I'm interested in and zoom that in on the page. Now, one thing to note is that the way that the data model is currently set up is that these Plant Center annotation, these labels here, are designed to print at a certain scale so that they read nicely. And that scale is set up to be a scale of 1 inch equals 20 feet, or 1 inch equals 240 inches, or anything zoomed on beyond that. So to make these labels show up really nice, I'd like to have my page show up at that scale. So to do that, you remember I talked a little bit about this scale box at the top here. I can enter 240 into this box, and I will zoom to that scale. So then when I print this out, that means 1 inch on this page will be equal to 20 feet on the ground, which is a pretty nice scale for being able to measure stuff out and see the majority of plants. If you have a really complicated garden, it's also common to use a scale of 1 inch equals 10 feet, and that way there's a little bit more space between the plants. Now the problem here is you can see that once we zoom to that scale, this map no longer fits or the entire section doesn't fit on one page. So it's pretty common in gardens to print what we call map books, or have a book of multiple pages that cover that entire section. And although we're not going to take the time to cover that today, there is a built-in function of ArcMap called Data-Driven Pages that will allow us to print those sort of books. But for today's purposes, we're just going to focus on printing one, and let's do the left portion, or the western portion of this garden, and make that fit nicely. So you can grab the pan tool and pan your map around until it fits nicely on the screen or on the page. Okay, so now let's add some extra information to this map to make it a little bit more user-friendly. So we can use the Insert menu here at the top and add a title. And then I ask, what title would you like to give your map? I'm going to call this the South Ericaceae section. And I'll hit OK. It places that text on the map, and then I can click on it and drag it and put it anywhere that seems comfortable. I can double click on this guy, and I can hit the change symbol button, and then I can change the text to make it bold, maybe make it a little bigger, and hit OK. And then click and drag that around and put it where I'd like. And maybe since this is for the UC Davis Arboretum, I want to add a logo to this map. I can do Insert Picture. And then it should open right up to my UC Davis Arboretum folder. If it doesn't, you can go from the drop down. Remember, we're on the C drive, our workshop folder, UC Davis Arboretum. And then we've got a logo file here. Can hit OK, and it adds our logo to the map. If it adds really big, we can click and drag this so we can see an edge, and then put your cursor over the corner and grab one of these little toggle points. And if you hold down the Shift key while you drag this, it'll maintain the correct proportions on this guy, and it'll make sure that it stays looking good. You can move it over and size it and get it to a nice size that we can click and drag. And I'm going to put this up here in the upper right hand corner of my map. And you can put that wherever you'd like. But now we've got a nice logo on our map. And since we've taken the time to set this map up at a nice scale, if say somebody wanted to take this map out in the garden and maybe draw in some new beds that they want to put out there. It might be handy to give them the tools to be able to do some measuring while they're out there, or at least know what size they're making things. So I'm going to insert a scale bar on here by doing insert scale bar. And it gives us a list of different scale bars that are available through ArcGIS. I like the alternating scale bar, so I'll select that. And before I put it on, I can look at the properties of this guy and see that right now it's going to make all of our divisions in miles, which is not really practical when we're talking about 20 feet. So I'm going to change this to feet and then hit OK and hit OK again, and it places the scale bar on the map for us with a pretty reasonable interval of 10 feet in between divisions, so it'll be really nice. That equals about a ½ inch, so we can be measuring stuff out on this really easily. And I could even take this one step further and add a little grid to this to make it even easier to look at stuff in the garden. And to do that, we could go to the over in the table of contents where it says layers. If you right click on layers and hit properties, you can see there's a tab for grids here. And I could click on grids, and it says reference grids are drawn on top of the data frame in layout view only. So we can add this grid in here, and we'll only see it when we're in this layout view. So we can do new grid, and we want to do a measured grid that divides a map into a grid of map units. And we'll click on next here. And we can leave some of the default options here. What we do want to set is the interval. We want our grid to be, since we've taken the time to set it to 1 inch equals 20 feet, we'll make it so that there's 1 inch grid marks or grid cells on our map or 20 feet apart. Then we can hit next and leave these default options and hit finish and then hit OK, and now we get a nice 20 inch or 20 foot grid around here. And you could go in and change these labels along the sides. You can change the mess around with this so that the grid lines up nicely with the corner of the thing, but we'll leave this as it is for now. A couple other things we might want to do is add a north arrow in here. We can do them for the insert. It's always good to know which way is north. So we'll go to the insert, we'll add north arrow. It brings up a library of different choices that we can choose from here. Choose whichever one you like. Press OK, and then you can click and drag this and put it anywhere on your map that you like. And now we can see that our section is kind of it's linear and it's kind of off at an angle, and it might be more convenient to rotate this page a little bit so that we can have it line up with the kind of the long direction of the page. So if we wanted to rotate this, we could go again over to the table of contents, double click on layers, and go to the general tab, and you see down at the bottom that there's an area that we can put in rotation. So here I can put in an angle, and I think from yesterday I remember that about -25 degrees will line this thing up and put it pretty straight on with the rest of our page. Now one thing to note when you rotate it is that our annotation that we have for our plants doesn't rotate with it. So there's some options that you could set a little deeper into the options in ArcGIS that'll allow you to set this up. We're not going to cover this today, but you can rotate that stuff if you want. But there's two different schools of thought. One is that sometimes you want your map to be rotated like this, and you can notice that our north arrow is rotated appropriately with us. But sometimes it's also convenient to have north being facing up, which is a pretty common way of thinking about maps. So you could choose to rotate this or not. We'll leave it as it is for now. And I think that's about it. Now maybe we want to make this map look a little bit better. We've kind of gotten some strange colors going here, and maybe we want to add a little bit of cartographic flair to this. And let's start off by, we can change the symbols on these layers and make them look a little bit better. So maybe our section boundaries, we can expand that in the table of contents and click on the symbol. And maybe I want to make this not fluorescent purple, just a black color, a little bit thicker. So that's a nice boundary on there. Maybe we want to take our planting area symbols here and change the soil planting area type to a more soil looking color. Click on the symbol, select tan here. It's looked okay. Makes it look a little bit more realistic. Under our pavement, maybe we want to make our pathway actually look like asphalt a little more, so I'll click on the symbol there and select gray here and click OK. And maybe we want our mass planting to be green, so we'll double click on the mass planting layer, and instead of having a different color for each type of mass planting, I can go to the Symbology tab here, and instead of having all these different categories, we'll just switch to features, give it one symbol, pick a nice green color, and hit OK. And then the same with our plant center points. Maybe we want these to draw in a little bit better symbol for mass plantings. Well, maybe we want this little circle with a dot in the middle of it. And change the size just a bit, pick a good color for it, hit OK. That changes those symbols for us. Same thing for the plant center. We'll also give it a similar symbol, but we'll make it a different color. Maybe this one's brown. And that makes our map look a lot nicer. We could change the fonts and size of these labels on here. I think I might like it when my map is not rotated, so I'm going to get rid of that. Looks like you need to put a 0 in there. That looks a bit better to me. Maybe I'll make the labels here a little bit darker for my planting areas. So to adjust those, if you remember, we can go to the properties on planting area and go to the labels tab. And I'm going to make that a bold color, maybe change the font to something else. Got lots of fonts to choose from here. Pick one that you like. I'll type one in here. Go with Tahoma. And now that looks a little bit better. Any questions on kind of setting up your page, making things look a little better? When we're all done here, we can save this, save our work, file, save. And then if we want to export this, we can either print it out, hit print from the file menu, or in our digital age we can export this map as a PDF. Or if we had selected the PDF printer, we could just print to PDF. But on the drop down here for the file type, we can select PDF. And you can select some options down here at the bottom, but the defaults are fine. We'll save it with this file name in our UC Davis Arboretum folder. And hit save. It goes through, it says export complete. If we want to see the results of our work here, we can go to the start menu, go to all programs, go to the accessories, and go to Windows Explorer. And then if you remember, our data is all stored on the C drive, GIS for Public Gardens Workshop, UC Davis Arboretum, and then you'll see the PDF logo in here. We can double click on that guy, and then you can see that pretty much what you see is what you get, and there's our map with all of our plants on it. Any questions about that?
One question about adding a scale to that map.
Sure.
Number of feet or half an inch on the map. You referred to it earlier on in the presentation about how if it's flat topography, you're turning sometimes steep topography into a flat map.
Sure.
When you add that scale, does it somehow adjust for that within the program?
Well, what happens is that when you take that, that curved surface and flatten it out, you usually, like we talked about spatial references that we've set up, when you assign a spatial reference to it, it generally it assigns a kind of coordinate system that's evenly spaced all across that area. So if there is topography, so say we're looking at a profile of land and there's like a big steep cliff here, and then we got some more ground right here. When you're looking at that from above, you're not really seeing that topography so much anymore. And our aerial photography is generally what we call orthorectified to adjust for that topography and the distortions it might cause. So you really don't get to see that that cliffside very much, and it just kind of your coordinate system goes evenly across it as if it were all a flat surface. Does that make sense at all?
Yeah, pretty much. I'm just visualizing the problem. Say I have a very steep slope, a couple of large conifers.
Yeah.
So if you measure from the base of one to the straight parallel to the earth, in effect, to the trunk of the other, the trunk, you get a different length line than from the base of the trunk down to the other.
Right. So generally, all your distances when you're looking at your data in a 2D GIS like this are measured that horizontal distance. So it is from trunk to trunk, and not from the base of trunk along the line of the topography, the line of the ground. So therefore, if you have a lot of stuff on a steep surface, you're going to have lots of things that look really close together on your map. So using the 3D GIS program, ArcScene will let you, twist your view a little bit so you can look at things and take into account that topography a little bit more. But yeah, it can be a little tricky when you're trying to map a lot of stuff in steep topography, for sure. But measuring the horizontal distance is always what you want to shoot for. Any other questions about that?
Is it difficult to do the multiple pages? I'm just trying to get a sense of that. So you could take a large map and divide it up into different pages?
Yeah, so there's actually, I believe there's a wizard that kind of will step you through the process. And generally the documentation in ArcMap is pretty good. And you can go to the help menu here, and you go to the ArcGIS desktop help, and the trick is really knowing what something is called to be able to find help about it, right? So in here we could go to search, and in a second it'll bring up, and I said I want to look for data-driven pages. Click on that, and it gives us a list of different things about data-driven pages. This what are data-driven pages is probably a good one to start at. And it gives you a description and kind of shows you how you would set them up. And remember we talked about that grid before. So we have a feature class in the data model that will allow you to draw a grid over your garden that would be used really easily to be able to set up this data-driven pages. And each cell of this grid could represent a page that you're going to print out.
Each page then could have its own grid, which could be different sizes.
Yes, you can also have, like we added a grid to this page, you can add that too. That's so that you can take...
It wouldn't have to be the same from page.
Exactly. Right. Any other questions about that? All right, so that's pretty much the majority of the exercises and what we're going to walk through today. I'd like so if you haven't saved your work, go ahead and do that. I'll save. And you can close out ArcMap, and we're pretty much done with that for the day.